All right, folks, how you doing? I hope you're all. If there's people there and you've tuned in, welcome to the Made to Parade broadcast on StreamYard tonight. That was just a wee video of tuned by myself. Or arranged by myself, the Rakes of Kildare, with a wee bit of inspiration from the Middlesex County volunteers. So, as I said, if you're here with joining me on the broadcast tonight, thanks very much for your interest. And again, if there is any questions that you have around the book or anything like that, then please, by all means, put them in the comments section, and I'll do my best to respond to those as well. It may not be as slick as the broadcast last night with Beyond Skin. I'm just sitting here doing this by myself and stuff. So thanks very much. And just want to say a big thank you as well to everybody who has bought the book so far. I really appreciate your support, and I'm hoping that more people, as they read it, more people may be encouraged to buy the book and share it, and maybe even pop me a wee review up on Amazon or something like that if you've got into it. Some of the feedback from people has been great so far, and people really enjoying it and really connecting with the story there. And I've just got a wee comment on from someone I know there, Elaine Bailey there, wishing me some good luck here for the night. So Elaine, thank you for that. That's great. So just in terms of the book itself, I thought it might be useful just to give a wee bit of a background as to where the idea came from, and some of the processes that I went through in terms of writing and getting the book published. And I'll not take up too much of your time with that. So I started writing this maybe about 4 years ago, and the idea came to me just as I was doing some work with Beyond Skin around bonds, and trying to help people understand the culture behind the marching bonds in Belfast and Northern Ireland. And I thought, what maybe sharing a story, or might be useful in terms of helping people get an inside look at what it means to be a member of a band. And for those of us who are involved in the scene, we know that with sometimes the media and everything, kind of, they'll jump on a negative story, they'll jump on that quicker than they will on something that the bonds do that's positive. And there's lots and lots of things that is positive about the bond scene. I mean, a lot of bonds are involved in charity-based work and everything as well. And suppose for me with the book, what I want to do is to provide a really positive narrative about what being in a member of a bond does for you and for me as a young person. I mean, in the book I talk about, I grew up on an interface between the Short Strand and Tar Street in East Belfast, and there was lots of things going on around that time. Sort of, we moved there in the sort of early '80s, and there was a lot of trouble around the interface. There's a lot of trouble going on in general. And for me, the bond was not quite an escape from that there, but it definitely was the distraction from getting involved in some of the stuff that was happening just up the street, from my house and so on. And one of the things that I note in the book is, coming home from practice, and when I left the house, everything was normal. And when I come home some nights from practice, the streets were littered with glass and scorch marks from petrol bombs and all sorts of stuff. There was even one night, one of the big concrete lamp stands had been, with street lamps, had been knocked over and broken up, and God knows what else had gone on around about that time. And whenever I started walking with the band and everything, my week from Thursday through to Sunday was just completely, all about being with the band and so on. So it did, was a real kind of distraction from things that were going on around about me. So the book covers about 2 years of my life, and it covers when I first joined the band, right through up to my first parades, right through, and the last chapter is about me walking my very first 12th of July parade. So there's some funny stories in there. There may be some incriminating stories in there as well, but hopefully it does justice to the positive that being a member of a band brought to my life and so on. So great. So if you are interested in getting a hold of the book, it is available on Amazon at the minute. And you can get that in a Kindle version, and you can also get it on paperback there as well. What I would suggest you, if you are living in the likes of Scotland or anywhere else, England, Wales, and beyond, it might be a good idea to pick it up from Amazon. And the delivery time on that's about 2 days at the minute. And anybody who's local to Northern Ireland, you want to give me a bell. I've got more copies coming, and I can help you out with getting a hold of it there, because at the minute all of the copies that I do have been paid for, and I'm sold out, which is a nice place to be in. So you'll see the wee message along the bottom. It's available on all Amazon sites across the world. The UK price is £10 on Amazon as well. All right, so great stuff. So if you haven't seen anything to do with the book, or you've missed all my millions of postings around it, it's available on paperback. Looks a bit like this. And another shout out to Robert Grattan, the guy who did the original painting that became the cover of the book. All I did was give him a couple of ideas, and he ended up creating this wonderful painting that became the cover of the book, and is now hanging up in my hall as well. So thanks, Robert. I really appreciate your great work on that. So tonight what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to read the second chapter of the book. Last night I read just the introduction on the launch, but I'm going to read the second chapter tonight. And that's about my first band practice. And the whole lead up to that, what happened was I had, obviously had seen the Pride of the Raven, which is the band that I joined when I was younger. And I always wondered, how on earth do you join a band? And we were coming home from school one day. I seen one of my friends, Darren. He was heading home, and I asked him, was he coming out with us all to play football that night? And he said he wasn't, that he was going to band practice. And I was like, all right, okay. What band have you joined? And he says, Pride of the Raven. I was like, what? That's my favorite band. And I'm going with you. I'm going to join us. I'm going to join the band tonight as well. And that's where it kind of started from. So the chapter where we pick it up from is after I've convinced my mum that, this might be a good idea for me to be involved in a band. And Darren and myself heading up to that very first practice. All right. So here we go. I'm just going to read that through for just some of the chapters in the book are quite long and stuff. So if you fall asleep or whatever, no worries. It's a cure, maybe a wee cure for insomnia for you. So here we go. All right. So chapter 2 is first band practice. Ding dong. The front doorbell rang, and even from 3 floors up, I could hear my ma going to open the hall door. After a short, muffled conversation, she used her best get down the stairs Gulder to beckon me from my lofty attic perch. Glenn! Aye, ma, what do you want? What do you mean, what do I want? I'll give you. What do you want? Get down here now. Darren's at the door for you. Come on, hurry up. I heard the hall and living room doors close. The ball was firmly in my court now, and no doubt I'll be timed on how long it takes me to come down. I jumped down the 5 stairs directly outside my room and hurried down the other 2 flights of stairs to arrive in the hallway, and I could see Darren standing at the front door through the glass hall door, decked out in a royal blue t-shirt and a bag in his hand. I opened the hall door with a standard greeting. All right, mate. All right, big son, how's it going? Aye, not too bad. All right, you ready to go? I am indeed. Here, is that the new Rangers top? Oh, it's a nice one, isn't it? I suppose I should have put a wee warning in here as well. Some swearing in here, so please don't report me. All right. So, yeah, it's a nice top, isn't it? Oh, it's a fucking cracker. Our conversation was then interrupted by my ma's super hearing. Glenn, I hope that's not I hear you swearing out there. Don't have me to come out there, I won't care if Darren's there or not. You're not too old to go over my knee, wee lad. Sorry, ma. Turning back to Darren, slightly embarrassed and in a slightly slower tone. Right, mate, let's get out of here. I don't want her annoying the fuck out of me. I closed the hall door behind me and zipped up my jacket as we headed out the gate. Suddenly, a familiar Gulder rang through the air. Lock the gate, Glenn. I headed back and put the latch in the gate and walked back towards Darren. I swear, mate, she must have eyes in the back of her head. Here, where did you get the new top anyway? Here, just Sunday past there. Madonna knew someone who was selling them up at Nuts Corner Market. Here, do you think you could get me one? What do I look like to you? Lifestyle sports catalogue and delivery service? Well, I nearly didn't recognize you without your name badge on. Now, I knew fine rightly my ma would never give me the money for a Rangers top. I mean, I'd get some long winded story about how other things were far more important, but little did she know how wrong she was. Fitting in with your weights is way more important than electricity or light for that matter. But hey, it's always worth the ask. Darn was one of my best mates, even though he was a few years older than me. And he was going into third year at Orangefield Boys School, where I was probably going in first year after the summer holidays. He was popular with the ladies, plus he could fight like fuck. And I was always useful because by default, if you knocked about with someone who could fight, well, people seem to think that you could fight as well. The logic being, why would someone who could hang around with someone who couldn't? Now, it wasn't that I couldn't handle myself. I just wasn't in the same league as him. Earlier on, he'd been telling me that he had joined Pride of the Raven. And after my encounters with the band when I'd seen them in the avenue, I didn't need an excuse. I was joining too, and tonight was the night. Absolutely nothing was going to stand in my way. Little did I know that this would be the start of what would become a weekly ritual of heading up to the Bandol on a Thursday night. Darren lived round the corner from me on Madrid Street, and his dad Geordie was one of the local youth leaders, and his nephew Colin, another friend of mine, lived across the street from him. He was famous near because he was a junior boxer, and he trained up at the Ledley Boxing Club. He had loads of trophies and medals, and his mum Sandra was always keen to show them off whenever he added to the collection. Darren had said that Colin's coaches had high hopes for him. They thought that when he was older, he'd be good enough to think about turning professional. As we started walking up the street, we turned left onto Madrid Street, heading towards Tempmore Avenue, and then we turned right and made our way up towards the Albert Bridge Road. Now, the avenue split in two, affectionately known as the Avenue and the Second Avenue, and that's probably the only thing that East Belfast has in common with New York City. So, how far are we heading up, I asked. Now, usually going anywhere that meant having to go past the Second Avenue required a special license from the Parental Association of Child Suppression. And we're just heading up the Beersbridge Road, mate, a wee bit down from the Woodstock, Darren said. All right, then, not too far then. I was nervous as meeting new people had never been my strong point, but this was offset by my mind racing with questions. What would it be like? Would I get a flute tonight? What if the guys in the band don't like me? What kind of secret location does a flute band practice in anyway? I imagine some kind of James Bond espionage scenario where secret knocks and code words and laser beams were the order of the day. Well, not really, although that would have been pretty cool. I mean, it isn't like you come across these places every day. And we came to the end of the Second Avenue and crossed the road at the Farmer's Rest, a bar that was run by a famous ex-Linfield player, Warren Feeney. And even though the bar had an actual name, most people just called it Feeney's. So we walked past the shortest part of the avenue and turned onto Beersbridge Road. We hadn't walked more than a few minutes up the road when Darren drew a halt just outside this bricked up place. It had a big bolted steel door and one of those spy hole things. Maybe this was a wee bit James Bond after all, although I have to say, this place didn't look like very much. Never mind the centre of musical accents. It looked like more like a hotel for rats and mice, to be honest. Right, this is it, said Darren. Are you sure? This is where the Pride of the Raven practice? There was a hint of holy shit tinge surprise in my voice. Mate, this looks like somewhere we clack wood for the bony. Ah, this is the place, said Darren. What we expecting? The Europa Hotel? Mate, this place looks like it's been bumped more times than the Europa Hotel. Darren shook his head and laughed. He was right, though. I had no idea what to expect. Maybe I was thinking that it would be somewhere with decent seats and a hint of forest glade in there. I definitely expected it to be a bit bigger, a decent-sized place. I mean, after all, it had to house nearly 40-odd people inside. How on earth were 40-odd people fitting into this place? This was going to be like one of those terrible house parties with a family, where there's bodies everywhere and you usually end up sitting on somebody's knee or on the stairs. Darren then leaned forward and gave the big bolted door a bladder, and we waited. Here, did your mum give you the joining fee? I mate, I had some job getting it out of her. Like, she went off on a wee rant about how we needed it for electric, and I'd be responsible if my brother's caught pneumonia. So I better, and I quote, become the next James Galway. Can you believe that? Here, she's not expecting much, is she? Oh, I know, mate. No pressure at all. Like, I haven't even joined the band yet, and she's expecting me to turn into James Galway. We were standing chatting away, almost forgetting that we'd wrapped the door, when we heard the sound of a lock being opened, then another and another. What the hell were they guarding in here that needed such tight security? And after a lot of clunk clicking, eventually the door opened, and a red-headed man popped his head out of the doorway, had a quick look around, spotted the two of us looking at the door. All right, Darren, come on in. Now, who's this? This is my mate Glenn. He's looking to join. He peered at me with a hint of suspicion and potential and said, flute or drum? I responded with, what the hell's he on about, Darren? You told me this was a pipe band. The red-headed man, I later knew to be called Frankie, laughed and said, you're going to fit right in here, kid. Come on in. So we made our way in through the door into a very small hallway with a set of stairs straight ahead and another door to the left that led to the main practice area. Taking it in and looking at the hall for the first time, I noticed that the walls were lined with trophies. I mean, they were all over the place, crowded on a serious number of shelves. I started checking them out to see what they were actually for. There was loads for first melody flute, for style and appearance, best drum corps, and best drum major. And alongside this vast array of trophies were old pictures of the band from God knows how long ago. Looking at these black and white photos, I could see smiles on the faces of everyone in the band, and almost a sense of pride as well. They all seemed to be proud of being in this band. There was one other strong characteristic, and that was the smell. The band hall had a very unique aroma, a mixture of smoke and spilled beer, lightly infused with a dose of male sweat. Now, it turns out that this place used to be a shop front and had now been converted into a band hall. Over the course of the next 15 minutes or so, there were quite a few bangs on the door, and more people started to arrive. I noticed that most of them all shook each other's hands, and they had a wee interaction that took place that seemed to be repeated over and over again. All right, mate. All right, mate. How's it going? Not too bad. Yourself? Can't complain. Sure, no one listens anyway. The hall was filling up rightly now, and there were pockets of people sitting grouped at tables, standing near the door, and me in the midst of all this, just sitting, taking it all in. The door went again. Go and get the door, Frankie. Stop sitting there looking pretty. He didn't even look good at that, I said, and that drew a laugh from the guys in the hall, but a glare from Darren. I gave him a look that said, sorry about that. You see, older mates don't like being slagged by younger mates in front of even older mates. A wee weird piece of social decorum, but here, rules are rules after all. Darren came back into the hall with this guy who to me looked a wee bit like Terry McDermott, one of my favourite Liverpool players, and they walked over towards where I was sitting. Darren says, right, Glenn, this is Terry. He looks after the learners. All right, Terry, aptly named. Said Terry with a confused look on his face. Sorry, it's just you look like a wee bit like Terry McDermott. Well, lads, it looks like we have another Liverpool supporter here. Oh, for fuck's sake, not another one, said a rough-looking black-haired man standing at the makeshift bar. Next thing he'll be telling us that he supports Linfield as well. Well, actually, I started to say, and Darren tapped me on the leg, shaking his head as if to say, it might not be safe to say that here. It was too late. I just blurted it all out. I am. What did you say your name was again? Said Terry. It's Glenn. I'm actually named after the Glens. You see, Glentoran and Linfield are the two biggest football teams in Belfast, and a fierce rivalry exists between them. And usually where you live decides who you support when it comes to the two teams. So if you're from East Belfast, you're supposed to be a Glen man. And if you're from South Belfast or the Shankill, you're a Blue man. Those wonderful social rules obviously didn't apply to me. I became a Blue man after a neighbour called Stanley, who lived a few doors up from a big granny, offered to take me to a match one Saturday about 4 years ago. Obviously, there was a need for my parents and my granny to be rid of me for a wee bit, so they said it was okay for me to go, and off I went. They were playing the RUC football team that fateful day in the Irish Cup, and as I sat in the South Stand at Windsor Park, the home of Linfield, I became a Blue man. The whole atmosphere, the banter and the crack from the fans was great, and the songs, well, they were something else, and when the crowd got going, it was something to behold. My decision was somewhat swayed by the fact that Linfield's colours were red, white and blue, and the stands were awash with scarves and hats, all pledging allegiance to the Blues. And I was also kind of swayed by the fact that I ran into my cousins from the Shankill at the game. My uncle Davy was a big Blue man, and now one of the family from the east had crossed the big divide. Terry laughed. A blue man named after the Glens who lives in East Belfast, wanting to join a band made up of Glenmen. Right now, I was absolutely shit myself. The one question that never come to mind was football affiliation. What the hell have I got myself into? I've taken some stick in school for being a Blue man. Well, a wee bit more than stick. A few socially conscious Glenmen have tried to beat that idea out of me, but their efforts have failed miserably, Of course, it wasn't a done thing in East Belfast. Don't worry, son, said Terry, obviously seeing the colour drain from my face. We won't hold it against you for long. Right, learners, where are you? He said, and a group of 4 or 5 people made their way over to where Terry was sitting. I hope you've all been practicing, lads. There was some mumbling and incomprehensible chatter. I'll take that as a yes then. Right, let's get your flutes out and let's hear you playing your scales. And I want you all to play the sixth and Italy after that. All right. So let's start off in the lower register on D. Off you go. The lads sitting around me took their flutes out of their pouches, putting folders in front of them, and they began to play a scale, going from the lowest note to the highest, with Terry sitting there a bit like a drill sergeant, calling out what notes the learners were supposed to be playing. He stopped every so often as Terry corrected the wrong fingering of the notes for some who got them mixed up with another, like the difference between an F sharp and an F natural. I had absolutely no clue what that meant, but I listened and watched intently just to see if there was anything I could pick up. I kept a wee eye on Darren, mainly just to see if he was any good or not. One thing I did notice though was even though they were all playing the same instrument, they all held it a slightly different way from each other. It obviously didn't matter as long as the right note was being played, but it did give me hope that I would be able to do this. Everyone had their own way, and that was okay. Once they were done practicing the scale, they started to play one of the most famous Bond tunes around, the Sice. We all knew the words to the Sice. Well, the first verse and chorus anyway. No one had ever taught me the words, but I just seemed to know them all the same. The way it was being played, though, here didn't sound great. And to be honest, it sounded worse than my class trying to play Three Blind Mice on the recorders. But here, they were playing a flute and I couldn't. So I kept my mouth shut and waited until it was my turn for Terry to help me out. After helping the guys work on their techniques and giving them a few notes for some new tunes, Terry finally turned his attention to me. Okay, Glenn, have you ever played the flute before? No. Have you ever smoked? No. Have you ever had to spit tobacco off the tip of your tongue? No. Have you ever used a milk bottle to make a whistling sound? I was glad that the questions were ending at this stage. If I'd known that joining a flute band came with its own bloody multiple choice exam called Things You've Done that might help you play a flute, I'd have studied harder. Thank God I was able to say yes to Terry's last question. I was starting to feel like a right dick. Getting a sound from a milk bottle, well, I could do that. And I know that it always annoyed my ma. So I was thinking, happy days, this will be easy. Terry reached into the bag and that he stored notes for all the learners and produced a flute and handed it to me. He says, well, let's have a go and see if we can't get you playing a note. There was a sense of excitement. This was my very own flute. Well, not really. It belonged to the band, but this thing was about to become like my best friend. Right, Glenn, let's get you holding this right. And Terry helped me hold the flute correctly. And when he was happy, we were able to move on. He says, right, the air hole here is called the embouchure, and we need to get a position correctly so that you can get the best sound from the flute. So why don't we give it a go here? Okay, here we go. My first attempts were absolutely terrible. Sorry, make that worse than terrible. I somehow managed to make the flute sound like someone trying to blow their nose. I didn't care though. I was determined, so I kept on trying. After a while, I'm watching me start to get frustrated and a few unhelpful sniggers from Darren and some of the other learners. Terry stepped in. Okay, said Terry, taking the flute from me. He separated it into 2 pieces and then handed back the head of the flute only to me. He said, try this. Roll the hole around towards your lips. If this is a chat up line, Terry, it's not working, I said. Terry laughed and said, do you want to learn or not? Just do what I'm asking. You'll understand in a moment. All right. So I brought the embouchure around like he said. Now, purse your lips and kiss the hole. Seriously? What do you take me for? Just do it, insisted Terry. Reluctantly, I did what I was asked, and Terry continued to coach me through it. Now, roll the flute away from you until you feel it resting below your bottom lip. Done. Now try. Suddenly, there was a note coming from the flute. Not a squeaky one, but a clean, crisp note. Terry seemed impressed, and it certainly seemed to wipe the smile of Darren's bake and the other learners who'd been laughing at my previous attempts. After making sure I could get the note consistently, Terry put the flute back together and got me to try again. And it wasn't just a fluke. After a few adjustments, there it was again, a clear note coming out of the flute. Terry gave me a copy of the scale, a weird-looking page that had all the notes you could play on the flute written down on it, with the finger positions required and what keys that needed to be open or closed, depending on what note you were trying to play. He went through it with me, explaining what way to look at it and what the keys were on the flute. He showed me 3 or 4 notes that he wanted me to practice, and I had to try them a few times there and then as well. Now, remember, Glenn, practice them every day. I'm expecting you to come to practice next week, doing them, or at least be able to play them and ready to move on. All right? Okay, Terry, I'll give it a go. Now, don't worry if you don't get the note right all the time. Believe me, you won't. You've done well tonight, but just keep going. Even if you get frustrated, remember what I've shown you. I will. I want to be able to play. I'll do whatever it takes. Good man. And with that, my first ever flute lesson was over. I put the flute down on the table and positioned it in the same way that it was drawn on the sheet with the scale on it. And I started to think about what keys are what, and if I really tried hard, that I could get even more notes learned for the next practice than Terry had asked me to. Right, lads, main practice in 15 minutes, said Terry, and at that, more people seemed to arrive and take their seats around the hall. Some of the learners left, said their goodbyes, and shook hands with some of the senior members. See you next week, Terry. Aye, lads, you will indeed. Now, remember what I showed you. Get stuck in and practice as much as you can. I sat there thinking, should I be leaving with them? But I was curious about what the main practice was like. And besides, Darren looked like he was staying. But I thought I'll ask Terry here anyway. Terry, yes, mate, do all the learners have to leave now? No, not if you don't need to. I mean, why don't you and Darren sit at the wee seat here beside Alvin and watch what he does? He's been coming along rightly over these past few weeks. It'll do you good to hear the band playing anyway and get some of the harder tunes into your head. So Darren and I made our way over to where we Alvin was sitting. All right, mate. Terry was saying it'd be good for us to listen in and watch what you're doing. Is that all right? Oh, I know, bother, mate. I'll help you follow the tunes the best I can. Thanks. Here, you got on all right with the flute earlier. I heard you starting to get a note out of it. Aye, I know. It'll probably take me ages to pick it up properly, though. It will, but it's different for everyone. I mean, Flip, it took me 3 practices, I think, before I got a note out of it. So you're doing all right. Really? That makes me feel a wee bit better. I was looking around and thinking everyone's probably laughing at me trying to get a note out of it. I mean, at one point, I actually thought I could blow the house down. Well, I was blowing that hard. No one was laughing at you, believe me. We've all been there, felt like that. But once you start getting it and learning the scale and the tunes, everyone just wants you to get better. That's all right. So, how long have you been in the band then? Well, I've been in the band about 4 years now. You see, my dad and my brothers are here too. At first, I was kind of dragged along, but now yeah, I love it. Well, which one's your dad then? Right, you see him up there at the front with the glasses? Alvin was pointing to a reasonably tall one. He kind of reminded me of Frank Carson. He said, that's my dad there, Jim. He's a drummer, and my 2 brothers are in the band too. That's Mark over there. He's a food blower, and Colin, he's learning to play the drum. While Alvin had been talking to me, one thing he said had stood out. He had been in the band for 4 years already. What if it takes that long to learn to play the flute? I'll be older than my dad before I'm walking, for fuck's sake. Have you been learning the flute all that time? I asked. And he obviously seen the expression on my face. No. I started playing the triangle when I first joined and then moved on to the cymbals. And I've been learning the flute for about 6 or 7 months now. I'm hoping I'm going to be ready to walk by the last Saturday in August this year. I've a first few tunes to get off the list first, though. That didn't sound too bad. I could wait 6 or 7 months, but the marching season would be over by then. So probably the following year that I get walking. I was sitting there plotting out my career as a bandsman when I glanced at my watch and was hit squarely in the face with the fact that by staying for the main practice meant that I was going to be way out past the time that I agreed to be back in the house with my ma. But I didn't care. Who the hell was I kidding? My mom would be waiting for me and give me a right scalping for being out late. But from the moment Terry called the first tune and the bass drummer got the practice up and running, I was lost in the sights and sounds that was the main band practice. And for the next 90 minutes, I sat there, glued to my seat. I'd never heard anything like it in my life. Hearing the band at practice was so different to hearing them march in the street. They played tune after tune, and there were so many I didn't know. I hadn't heard half of them. There were notes being played that were just magical to me. They played so many different tunes, I thought, how on earth am I going to learn all these? And then there was a moment while the band was playing a tune called Dinah's Delight that just grabbed me. Well, one note did, and that one note became my motivation. I wanted to be able to play that tune. I had a lot of work to do to get there, but get there I would. I didn't want the practice to end. I was really enjoying listening to the band. And after the last tune, Terry just said 2 words, the Queen. And with that, everyone stood. Not really knowing what was going on, I stood up with everybody else. The band then played the national anthem, and that was that. The main practice was over. Flutes and drums were put away, and Darren and I made our way to the door to leave. All right, Glenn, see you on Sunday again, Alvin said. Sunday? You mean this happens more than once a week? Alvin started to laugh. I was like a kid in a sweet shop. Imagine getting to the end of the weekend with band practice. It would make waking up for school a little easier. Oh, I'll be here on Sunday, all right. Just try and keep me away. Good luck with your scale. Thanks. I'll see you on Sunday then. Darn and I left the hall and headed home. Well, what did you think of that, Glenn? Said Darn. I thought it was brilliant. They sounded even better than they do when they're marching on the street. The only thing I'm worried about now is my ma. She was expecting me home way earlier than this. Just tell you were waiting on me because you didn't want to walk down on your own. Brilliant. That might just do it. Good call, mate. I relaxed a little, as having a good excuse for an angry parent is an essential skill. You have to have confidence in it. It helps with convincing them. Here we Alvin's dead on, isn't he? Oh, he is. His Donna's brothers are dead on too. All the older guys are as well, once you get to know them. Oh, there's some banter at him, isn't there? Mate, you haven't heard the half of it. When they get going, I'm telling you, the crack's mental. We picked up the pace and walked pretty quickly towards the avenue. We needed to. Well, I needed to. Getting home as quickly as possible for me now was the priority. Knowing you relate with a reasonable excuse is okay, but you need to make sure you're not taking the absolute piss out of the situation. That could have far-reaching consequences, like being grounded, and I didn't want to be grounded now that I had joined the band. We came around the corner and back onto Madrid Street, walking past the now closed chemist on the corner, and then crossing over the road and past the railings of the other Rupert Stanley building located on Templemere Avenue. The streetlights that led the way to our homes were glowing a misty orange colour, almost like they had halos. The streets were empty, bar Darren and myself. There wasn't a sinner out and about, as my granny would have said. The streets looked and felt strangely peaceful. You'd never guess that a space just a few hundred yards away between our area and the Short Strand could turn into a war zone at any time. We stopped at the top of my street. Darren and I said our goodbyes, and I headed for the house. See you tomorrow, mate. I'll call for you when I've got in from school. Make sure you're still alive, said Darren, laughing. All I could hope for was now that my ma would buy my excuse and maybe would even be interested in hearing me play a note on my flute. After all, she's the one that wants me to become the next James Galway. As I opened the gate and closed it behind me, I paused before I took the 3 steps that would lead me into the hallway. I thought about the first time I'd seen Part of the Raven walking up the avenue, and now, here at the tail end of one of the best Thursday nights of my life, I realised that I had just taken my first steps in a journey that would hopefully lead to me walking the streets of Belfast with them. As I closed the front door behind me, I noticed that the living room door was open, and a familiar voice responded to my late return home. Glenn, is that you? Uh-oh, here we go. All right, folks, that's the end of that chapter there. So hopefully you have enjoyed that. I can see there that Thomas Gray has popped a wee comment up there saying that we all identify with first band practice. It's something we all have experienced to some degree, haven't we? We've all had that moment we've walked into a place for the first time and we're meeting people and not knowing what they expect and everything as well. So yes, Thomas, thanks for the comment there. I appreciate that. So folks, that's it for tonight, and I thank everybody who has who's joined in with us. And as I say, if you are interested in getting a copy of the book, if you want to get it right now, Amazon's the best place to do it. So if you just go on to any of the Amazon sites, no matter where you are in the world, just do a wee search for Made to Parade, and the book will come up, and you can order it there in paperback and on Kindle as well. So the paperback version is £10 and the Kindle version is $9.99. So if you want to save yourself 1p, get the Kindle version. All right. So folks, thanks very much. And I'm going to do this again at some point in the future. So if you are interested in that there, then drop me a comment or so on. I see my wee mate who's mentioned in the book there, Alvin, has popped a comment up as well there. Alvin, very good. Enjoyed that, mate. We need to hear the rest of it, mate. There's some stories in there about you, son. So great. I hope you enjoy those as well. And Gareth Fulton as well, saying, good man. Thanks very much, Gareth. I appreciate the comment there. And then Elaine's popped up with superb writing. Well, we'll see about that. We'll see what other people think about that as well. But appreciate that comment as well there. All right. So, folks, I hope you have a great weekend, whatever you get up to. Remember, stay safe, look after yourselves, and thanks very much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank you, and all the best.